All right, we are live on Amazon, and D. Scott here with Molly Lord. She's written a new book, Holy Dirt, about her journey, and we're going to learn all about this pilgrimage and this history around it. So let's just get on the screen for a moment, and let's just talk about some of the things that are coming up. I just want to tell people right off the bat that I do have a radio show, and that is the Waco Experience, an American Story. I've got it highlighted in the carousel because not only, of course, is it a radio broadcast here in Waco, Texas, and for fans of Magnolia, you'll recognize, oh, there they are, the silos right behind me there. It was a picture my wife and I took a while back when we were visiting. But we've got the Waco Experience, an American Story, as a radio show, and of course, broadcasts on KBBW here in Waco. But it also converts into a podcast. And then, of course, people ask, Scott, what tools do you use? And Molly and I have been having conversations about microphones and
Yes, we have.
recorders. So I use this. I do a portable studio, and I use this little Zoom Q8N 4K. It's got the XLRs. It's got this detachable mic. It's actually a 4K camera. This thing works great as a mobile studio for recording. And then I do use a pair of the Shure SM7B microphones. I like these. They sound so clear and clean. They eliminate a lot of the background noise, so it's been great to use that. All of my guests and myself, we use these AKG semi-open headphones. They are fabulous. Here in the home studio, I use the Electro Voice RE20. This is like the classic radio microphone that's out there. And that's a lot of fun. Oh, to power the headphones, we use the Zoom headphone amp. This is battery powered plus USB. It's handy. It's a handy
You are
tool.
such a geek.
I've got all the geeky things, including I am a big Bose fan. And so I've got this Bluetooth speaker. And when I travel, this goes with me because it also works as a microphone. And when I do conference calls, it sounds great. And the microphone picks up. And so it makes a great microphone, speaker, conference room deal. Plus, you play cool music and it sounds nice. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about this right here. Holy Dirt, a Camino journey. And there's a soundtrack that goes with it. But Molly, let's have you, first of all, introduce yourself.
Okay. I am Molly Lord. I am in Colorado Springs. And I have a fascinating business that I get to play with music and what happens when music crawls inside people's heads. And people who work with me in my workshops are a bit taken aback about what is really happening when music crawls inside our head. So that's what I get to do. And it's based on Joseph Campbell's hero's journey and how music meshes with our daily journey in life. And I just finished several years of writing a book. That was consuming. About my Camino experience.
Yeah.
So that's what my life is right now.
You know, music is like nothing else, right?
Right.
I mean, if I tell you a story or a joke in the morning and in the afternoon, I start to do the same setup for a joke, and you're like, all right, Scott, I heard this one. But with music, we can listen to the same song 3 or 4 times a day, easy.
What a great point.
And still be singing along each time.
Yeah. It feeds right into our energy system. And based on the state of mind we're in the moment is how that music is received and how it's interpreted. And it's a chemical reaction. It's a spiritual reaction. It's an emotional reaction.
Mhm.
We don't realize all that's going on. We just think, I love this song. I
Right.
love this artist. But if we chose music based on the truth, we we're a music pharmacy. How we process music.
That's an interesting comment. Music pharmacy.
Hmm.
It just, it was, I think art breaks down under analysis in some cases.
Yeah.
And it's just something to be able to just take that music for what it is, for uh if you're sad, if you're happy, if you're remembering the past, thinking about the future, there's something in every song.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's a song for every situation.
Well, I think music is she's an entity unto herself.
Hmm.
Um, Bon Jovi was being interviewed once, and the person interviewing him said, before this was back years ago when It's My Life, when that album was coming out. And so you knew he was going to play the main song from the album. And she said, before, we get to promoting your new album, I have a question for you. And he said, sure, go ahead. She said, it's not about the music you play specifically. I just want to talk about music. Why is it we respond the way we do? And why is it important? And why should it be important to us? And he didn't expect that question, but he thought about it for a minute and he said, I view music as a goddess front and center in our lives. And he said, I don't think the important thing is to talk about what music we think is worthy of listening to and what's not worthy of listening to. He said, I think it's time we become worthy of the music.
Ooh.
And that got my attention, as though she is an entity all unto herself, to be honored. It's been in every culture from the dawn of humankind.
Mhm.
And there's got to be something to it other than, oh, nice beat, you know?
I was just thinking back to Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner did this skit, which they turned into an animated little cartoon about the 2,000-year-old man, and they were talking about music, how music gets started, and he said it was fear, and of course it was like everything came from fear, and he's got this little thing where it was like, "Help! A lion is chewing my foot off." Anyway, that was Mel Brooks. So there you go.
Yeah,
Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner. There's a combo that
they
you.
were a dangerous combination.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So being worthy of the music, and I'll just tell people we got a few songs. So you have this whole playlist that you had in your mind that you took with you on this journey. Let's go back and talk about this whole pilgrimaging that thousands of people do a year, and it's
Right.
been going on for many years.
Oh, centuries.
So let's go back and talk about some of the history of this pilgrimage, of this route.
Okay. Uh, there are quite a few routes that one can take for a pilgrimage. Um, Most are in Spain, but there are caminos in Germany, Ireland, France, UK, um, but they can all be linked. And what the most popular for centuries route has been from France over the Pyrenees into Spain and across northern Spain. And every French or most French and all Spanish caminos end up in Santiago de Compostela. which
And just
is
to translate for folks, Camino means road. That's the Spanish word for road.
mhm, the way, the road.
Hmm.
Mhm. And when you arrive in Santiago, if you do, there's a huge cathedral that was built in honor of St. James. And the story goes that uh, St. James was an apostle of Christ. And when um, he was beheaded, and his body was, he was beheaded by Herod, I believe. And when his body was returned to Spain, his remains were buried. And when they were recovered a century later, I'm not sure what the timing is, um, they built the shrine to him. And pilgrims, it was a religious pilgrim to start with, and pilgrims came from all over Europe to make this pilgrimage to the bones of St. James. And then this cathedral was built over years and years, and it's magnificent. Um, so for a couple centuries, it was mainly a very harsh pilgrimage that was done for religious reasons. Um, in the last 30 some years, um, it's become more of a personal spiritual pilgrimage for whatever reason you want to do it.
Hmm.
It You don't have to do a religious one. It can be an adventure. It can be a lot of people set out going, yeah, I think I would like to walk for 4 or 5 weeks,
Yeah, I was
and
just
they
going to
don't.
ask, let's get some of the numbers so it gives people an idea. Um,
Right,
how long? I mean, it can be any port, and I know people do. So, like the Pacific Crest Trail from Mexico to Canada, people do it in sections, and maybe
right,
they'll do just a portion of it.
right.
But the Camino here, what was the length of time, and how many miles did you cover?
500. So my journey began in St. Peter-Port, France, at the base of the Pyrenees on the French side. And halfway through the Pyrenees, it crosses into Spain. And at the bottom is Roncesvalles. A lot of people start there if they want to do it just in Spain. And then it continues on across northern Spain. So it's 500 miles total if you
Wow.
do that span of it, which is the most popular, though you can join it at any point along that route that you want. The
Yeah.
goal usually is to make it to Santiago.
So let me just put this up here because we are talking about Molly Lord's book, Holy Dirt, The Camino Journey. Number one Amazon bestseller, by the way. Congratulations.
Thank
Uh,
you.
and soundtrack of a hero's journey. And so 500 miles in how long again did it take?
5.5 weeks it took me. Some people do it in 30 days. I can't imagine. I think you would
Wow.
miss something. I could be wrong. I don't want to
Well, and
judge.
that's um, that's an interesting thing because I want to talk about motivations to do this type of a journey, and I wanted to get the numbers out there so that people understand. 500 miles, right? This is not uh, a weekend getaway trek that
No,
you went on, right? Where
right.
you just said, "Hey, I'll I'll,
Yeah.
I'll drive a couple hours and walk for a few
Nothing
miles,"
like a good walk. Yeah,
right?
no, that wasn't it.
This is something that takes planning. It takes perseverance, but uh, a lot of things are going to happen on a trip like that, wherever it is. Now, this one
Mhm.
there's a lot of significance about the route. Um, so just to get an idea, all these weeks, these hundreds of miles that you were on, let's go back to when did this become an idea that you wanted to do this?
Mm.
This is an Everest kind of summiting.
It felt like that. Um, I when I first heard about it, I said, "Not in your life." A good friend of mine told me about his journey doing it. He actually did 1,000 miles. He started in France, I believe. I mean, way not where I started in France. Um, yeah, that's crazy. 1,000 miles. And at the time, if he had told me that even a year before, I would say, I'm so in. But at the time he told me, I was at a period of my life where some old injuries, 40-year-old injuries, were returning, raising their ugly heads. And it was a back injury, a knee injury that I thought, if I don't have a knee replacement before I go, I don't think I can do it. And so I dismissed it. But it was about a year later when these injuries were really talking to me that I thought, it's because of these injuries I should go.
Okay.
I I gave myself 2 years after making that decision, a year to rehab
Hmm.
the injuries as much as I could because I had been very lazy about that for the decades before, and then a year to train, and 2 years later, I was there.
And people might want to get onto YouTube and take a look at clips of the Tour de France as it goes through the Pyrenees Mountains. If they want to get some glimpses of what it looks like, these are not insignificant mountains that you had to cross.
Well, I have to be honest right now about the Pyrenees. Um, I trained for 2 years to cross the Pyrenees, and a week before I left, I injured a hamstring.
Ooh.
And I pulled a hamstring by training too hard right before I left. And so my intention the whole time was to do this alone. It would be a solo pilgrimage. And a few months before, my good friend Renee called and said, I know you want to do this alone, and I know why, but I could carve out a week from work. What do you think about my walking just the first week with you? And then I've got to
Hmm.
come home and then you continue on yourself. And I was surprised because I had thought, no, I'm doing this alone. I said, that sounds like fun. So that's what we planned. And she did this walk a week before we left with me. And I pulled this hamstring and I almost couldn't go.
Oh my.
It was that bad. I couldn't even climb my steps in my home. And I thought, and you want me to climb the Pyrenees?
Well, and I'm
So I'm
thinking,
getting all
you got
sorts.
a 15, 18-hour plane flight. I can't imagine being
Yeah.
cooped up in the
So
plane. Yeah.
I was getting intense therapy on my leg, trying to just make this work. And that happened on a Saturday. We were leaving the next Friday. By Wednesday, I called my friend Patrick, who had initially told me about, he had mentioned this to me. He's the one that I heard about it first. He was going to be 3 days behind me with our friend Bill. Um, they knew I wanted to walk it alone. And but they wanted to walk, they had already walked it and they wanted to do it again. So they'd be behind me. So they were my cheerleaders to get me there, right? So I had to call Pat and go say, I don't know how to tell you this, but I've injured my leg and
Hmm.
I'm not seeing it. And he, instead of getting the sympathy I wanted, Scott, I got
Uh-oh.
the response of, "Oh, I'm sorry, you must have mistaken me for someone who would buy this story."
So you're not
Where's
getting
your
out of this.
empathy?"
Yeah.
And he said, I think you should be on that plane. And
Mhm.
remember, your purpose for doing this is to be bigger than your injuries, to partner with your body and work through this, not shy from it. And of course, you injured yourself. I think the Camino is testing you. So, long story short, I was on the plane 2 days later, and I knew I could not do the Pyrenees or I'd ruin the rest of the journey.
Mhm.
So, the friend I roped into doing this, she walked the Pyrenees without me, and I kept up with a van,
Okay.
actually, the van that carried everyone's backpacks who didn't want to carry them across the Pyrenees. And we
Makes
stayed
sense to
at
me.
an albergue, a hostel at the
Mhm.
halfway up the Pyrenees. So I would meet her, and then the next day she'd get on the trail and finish, and I'd be in tears because I'm supposed to be doing it.
Mhm.
So the first 2 days she walked without me. By the third day, my leg was ready to go.
Yeah.
So I started in Spain.
Well, discretion is often the better part of
Oh,
valor,
I
right?
yeah, I would have blown the rest of the trip had I
Yeah. Yeah.
let my
So smart.
ego get in there.
So we're talking with Molly Lord in her book, Holy Dirt, a Camino Journey. It's highlighted right here in the carousel. You can just click. It's going to open a new tab. Hit add to cart. You're gonna want to do that, and you might want to get some multiple copies. Great thing about Amazon is that you can get a copy, add to cart, uh, put in a friend's address, someone who needs to learn to be worthy of the music.
What a beautiful way to put that.
So you had thoughts, obviously, coming into this. You had time to prepare, a couple of years as you were
Mhm.
rehabbing and training for this. You had a lot of expectations. There's no way you can go into this with no expectation of what it's like. And right off the bat, first expectation is you're not going to is not going to be met. Walking the Pyrenees, pyramids. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
maybe there's some language crossover there, but the Pyrenees. So that changed. You ended up in the van for those days, and
Yeah. You know what
tell me
happened?
about your thoughts there.
Yeah. Um, oh, I went through it all. I went through self beat up. Um, I went through um, feeling like I was a fraud. Well, I can't call myself a pilgrim. I'm not doing the Pyrenees. I'm in a flippin' van. Um, so there was a lot of self beat up.
Mhm,
However, one of the things I was told in the van climbing that first day, um, the driver said, you've got to understand that what has happened is perfect. Your friend Renee is supposed to walk it alone. And the reason I know that is that's how it unfolded. And you are supposed to get some message by not walking it. This is your Camino. This is not your Camino hasn't begun yet. This is your Camino. So knock it off because he heard the beat up going on, right? And
oh
so
my gosh.
he was my first angel. He told me, pay attention to the people you meet on this trail.
Mhm,
Call them angels. Pay attention. And I considered him, his name was Jose. He was my first. He was my first angel to clarify, to knock me out of that thinking. And
mhm,
at the top of that mountain, Scott, I received the message for my whole Camino. There was a man um, sitting at a picnic table. I got talking to him. His name was Roman. He was from Ukraine. And it was his second Camino. And he was sitting there eating a bowl of hot vegetable soup. And because of my odd diet, I'm just staring at it saying, I want some. So he arranged, it wasn't on the menu. He knew the cook.
Hmm.
So he got me a bowl and we talked and we talked and talked. And when he um, was getting ready to leave to finish walking the Pyrenees, he bent down to tie his boots and he picked up a handful of gravel and dirt and let it cascade from his hand like a waterfall. And he said, Molly, you're not going to understand this yet,
Hmm.
but this is holy dirt
Wow.
and you need to immerse yourself in it. Um, wrap your whole being in it. Make sure you get dirty. And I knew he had just said something to me that wasn't to be taken literally, but I didn't get it. And I didn't get it
As
yet.
he said that you wouldn't get it.
Right,
And here we have the title of the book, Holy Dirt, the
right.
Camino
That's where
Journey.
it comes from. And I tucked that away. We ran in so that um, the next day, Renee walked on her own again. But at the bottom in Spain, I met with her and we started walking together. We ran into Roman one more time. And he warned us. He knew I had a hamstring injury and Renee had a hip injury that she arrived with. And he said, just want to make sure that you ladies notice the terrain ahead. This is a tough day. And at the end of the last several hours, it's pretty rough. Have you looked at the map?
Hmm.
No. So he pulls out the map and I say, holy shit. And Renee says, holy crap. I
Mm.
didn't know that's what was ahead. And he said, no, 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 ladies, it's holy dirt. And he tips his hat. He says, Buen Camino. And he walks away. And I never saw Roman again.
Wow.
And that I would spend the next almost 500 miles coming to the understanding of why it's holy dirt. Because once you quit whining after the first week, you start noticing the miracles. And you
Hmm.
also notice that you can walk 20 miles a day, whereas at home, it would kill you.
Mm.
But when you're on this trail, it's as though this amazing energy radiates up from the dirt through your feet and empowers you to do things and think things and realize things you wouldn't have done at home.
I just want
So,
to. I want to continue on this journey. Is we've started with you from the training, riding in the van, starting in Spain on the dirt, on this holy dirt, meeting Roman and also your philosopher van driver.
right.
But here we've got the book up. It's in the carousel, Holy Dirt, A Camino Journey. It is a #1 bestseller. And in the background, you can see there's some symbols. And this is a shell. And it's part of the markings for this particular Camino. And but what I want to focus on is the cover photo because these poppies, this watercolor, it's just striking and different that you might think from a travel book where it would be maybe a road sign or the I will say the stereotypical the shell right
Right.
marking of the trail or something. Yours is way different. So let's learn a little bit about why you chose that as a cover.
Mm. I worked with several artists and they were excellent artists, but I knew I would know my cover when I saw it. I wanted it to be um, something that captured the spirit of my experience. And there was nothing like rounding a corner on a dirt trail and having miles and miles of poppy fields ahead. It took my breath away.
I would
And
imagine.
in the spring, that's what you experience on the Camino. So that was etched in my head. There were many other symbols that could have been captured by an artist. Um, that when I saw this, I said, "This is it. This is my cover." And I contacted the artist, and
And who is the artist on that?
it is Yana Yevets. I think I'm saying that. She's from
Mhm,
Ukraine,
mhm.
and beautiful young woman, um, and a beautiful artist. She does a lot of watercolor, and I knew that was Spain.
So this is the beautiful cover, something that everyone should have on their shelf. Holy Dirt: A Camino Journey, Molly Lord's book. Now it's available on Amazon. Number one bestseller. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
I'm just I'm taken in by this journey, and uh, you talk about a hero's journey,
Mhm,
and you're a writer,
mhm.
and written a screenplay, gone through that whole process,
Yeah.
and we talk about the hero's journey. Can you explain what the hero's journey is, and then how does that apply to this book and your experience?
Um, Joseph Campbell kind of brought the hero's journey into layperson's terms. He studied mythology and is the most beautiful storyteller on mythological stories. And every movie we watch, every fairy tale, every epic, whether it's Star Wars or The Hobbit, or they all follow the hero's journey path. And what it is usually though, or always, those movies start with the hero of the story being in their everyday life. Everything is normal and calm. Well, then something happens, and it puts them in a deep dive into some sort of problem, usually. And that kicks in the journey. The first thing they do is, I don't want this. And that happens in our life too. Something happens, we get a diagnosis, we're injured, we suddenly have to move. Something that kicks in, something where we say, wow, I didn't see that coming. And we complain at first and resist, but life moves forward and
Mhm,
we take that journey. And as we go through the cycle, we go through denial, and then we find a mentor usually, and then we're on the journey making decisions about how should we approach this, and then we approach it in that way, which is our warrior, and we go through this whole cycle. It's a circle, and we hope that on this journey that we too can slay the dragon, to speak in mythology terms. We too can slay the dragon. We
mhm.
can go out into the kingdom and find the elixir and bring it home to people we love at the end, and hope that we are a better person at the end of this journey. That's the hero's journey. And there's trials and tribulations, and there's the resurrection, and there are false summits, and I mean, it's a parallel to the Camino like I didn't expect. I
I love that you
teach
mentioned
this.
fall summits because having spent uh, a lot of times out backpacking and in the Cascade Mountains, which are also not insignificant mountains there in the
Right.
Northwest. Um, as we're headed toward our journey, I always say, "Oh, thank God for fall summits," because at least it gave me a plateau and a moment to say, "All right, whew, we hit that. Now
Yeah.
we'll gather our energy for the next."
Right.
So I want to remind people that Holy Dirt: A Camino Journey, Molly Lord's number one Amazon best-selling book, is available. It's in the carousel. Click add to cart. Um, I mentioned she's a writer. This is a well-written book, not just well-spoken. A well-written book. All right, and add to cart. Beautiful art. Something you want to have on the coffee table for sure, just to share with people. But this journey. So, we talk about this hero's journey. Tell me about your hero's journey. We know you
Mhm.
had some adversity as you started.
Yeah. My whole how do I say? If you've ever read The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, he talks about everyone needs to know what their desert is to cross in life. Um, what is the big thing in your life that maybe it's part of your purpose to face it and become better because you have faced it? Uh, I discovered mine was to befriend my body. There was a saying growing up in my household uh, that Molly is an accident waiting to happen.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
And it wasn't just injuring myself, but it was the way I have to eat. And if I don't eat that way, I get sick and I'll ruin family vacation. You know, it was just this mindset of, oh, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen to Molly. And I never viewed it that way. I kind of like living on the edge, but I was viewed as an accident waiting to happen. Well, after many years of many accidents, um, and injuries that lingered, uh, I started to buy it. And probably the biggest moment, Scott, was that forced me to have a turning point is, and it's funny, after the 6 women that went up in space today, it was a big
Yes.
day
Yeah.
to watch that. Um, I wanted to be the teacher that went up in Challenger. I
Mm,
applied to be the teacher in space back in 1980. Well, the launch was in 86, but
yeah.
applied in 85. And after making the first 2 cuts, I was sure this was mine. And when I didn't make it as the chosen one,
Mm,
Krista McAuliffe was chosen. I really thought God and NASA had made a huge mistake, that I was supposed to be in that Challenger space shuttle.
mhm.
Well, we all know what happened.
Yeah.
You know, a year later, I'm very grateful I wasn't in that
And
space shuttle.
those of us remember. I mean, I
Yeah.
remember being in my living room and going into the dining room and collapsing in a chair.
Yeah. I was in my classroom with the
Mm,
kids. I was a teacher then. So,
yeah.
when I was going through the application process and it was going well, my
Mhm.
mother, who a wonderful woman, but very worried about my choices because I'm an accident waiting to happen. And she tried to tell me how dangerous this could be. So it was a point of contention.
Mhm.
Mom, you need to let go of that.
Mm.
Well, when she got to be right about that, I had to think, am I an
Wow.
accident waiting to happen? Do I make choices that
Mhm.
set me up to lose? So it kicked in years of overcoming this fixed belief about myself, my body. Even though I had injuries, I didn't need to tie it to I'm an accident waiting to happen. I wanted to tie it to something more powerful.
Mm.
And it was that belief that drove me to say, you know what? I'm going to walk this damn Camino and
500 miles.
I'm going
Fi
to do it.
Yeah, 5
And
weeks.
it's not going to be my ego aiming to get to Santiago. I am going to let my body call the shots for the first time in my life, because I'm a kayaker, a hiker, a mountain biker, and I've always pushed it beyond where I should, and then I wonder why my injuries come back. I thought this time it will call the shots, and
Mhm.
it did the whole 500 miles.
Wow.
It
So
was
here
the
we are
biggest lesson of my life.
on Holy Dirt, a Camino journey, #1 Amazon bestseller, the author and traveler and hero of the story, Molly Lord. We started off talking about music, and you had thoughts about this. We talked about some of the expectations. You had expectations about music, about listening to things.
Mhm.
What happened?
Um, Even though my livelihood and my passion is to look at how music affects us, how it impacts our moods at certain moments, and how we can use it as a pharmacy if we choose certain music. I mean, I'm obsessed with it. I admit it. And but when I chose to walk the Camino, I knew how important it would be to be in the moment and to be where my feet are. And I was afraid that if I took an iPod or had in earbuds, that I would get distracted and not be in the moment. So I was not going to take music. In about 10 minutes before I'm racing around, leaving the house, limping on my leg, right, to leave for the airport, this little voice inside said, "No, put some music on your phone
Hmm.
just for this." I thought, well, I don't plan on listening to it, but okay. So I chose about a dozen songs, let intuition choose them of what would I want on a journey like this. And so I didn't put too much thought in it because we were leaving. So I threw them on my phone. And what I found, and those weren't the only songs that made up the soundtrack of my Camino. What I found to happen would you can walk in a cafe on the top of a mountaintop, this tiny cafe in a little Spanish village. You open the big wooden door and you can suddenly hear in English songs this music. And this happened to me. We had just had one of the windiest days we could have had, um, coming out of Pamplona, climbing this mountain. And we walk in, and it's The Wind by Cat Stevens. And I thought, really? So that got added to the soundtrack of my life. Another day, there were these young men that kind of poured out of these woods, but I heard them coming for like 10 minutes. They had speakers on their backpacks, and they were classical music artists that were studying in Barcelona, college students.
Hmm.
So it's all
Wow.
classical music. And I hear Moonlight Sonata coming out of these dark woods, like, what is this? And they come spilling out along with the music. So, of course, Moonlight Sonata is in the soundtrack of my Camino. So, songs got added to it, because of that. And a few were added once I got home and started writing the book and realized, there are a couple songs that mean a lot to me that fit the moment. So that's how my Camino, soundtrack took shape. So when I was on the Camino, other than just hearing certain songs as I went along because it was in a cafe or someone had it on in a speaker, um, I noticed that the songs I brought with me, they would start talking to me and say, "You're about to flip out over what's happening right now. I suggest this song." And I would think, good idea. And
Hmm.
so I would put the earbuds in and listen, and my whole nervous system would calm.
Hmm.
And I would think more clearly about how to solve the problem I found myself in. Because I did that a lot. A lot of challenges came up for me.
So let's talk about some of these challenges that came up. And let's put this book back up here. Highlighted in the carousel, which means you can click it. It's going to open a new tab. You can hit add to cart right there. Holy Dirt, a Camino Journey, #1 bestseller right here on Amazon. And we're talking to Molly Lord, the author and traveler on this Camino. So these hardships. So what came up?
You know, this first one I'll mention, there isn't a person who's walked the Camino. I don't care how long you walked, a week, 2 weeks, or this whole 500. Fatigue and aching to the bone, especially in your feet, is common. And you just think, I don't think I can do these next 8 miles, 6 miles, whatever is left. And you think you need to power up to do it. And what you eventually learn is I don't know how to say this. Um, we don't take baby steps for the distance they cover. We take just enough of them to meet the magic. So it's like whenever we take a step toward a vision we have and we give it our all, the universe steps in and meets that energy. And it almost drafts us. You know, it's like we feel we're being drafted. Have you ever had a goal and suddenly it takes flight and you think,
Mm-hmm.
whoa, this is on a roll? You didn't have to power yourself to the end. You just needed to take enough steps with enough trust and enough stick to itiveness in order to meet that point where the Camino took over. And the magic, we say the magic of the Camino, and that's not as in like there's a crystal ball or a magic wand. And um, it's that there's an energy field, anyone will tell you, to this pilgrimage trail that millions of people have walked over centuries.
Mm-hmm.
You can't tell me something wasn't left behind of their hopes,
Mm-hmm.
their dreams, their fears, and where the Camino met them in that dirt, grace is left behind.
You know, I was thinking there's uh, so you have this as you said, hundreds, thousands of years, millions of people have walked the same path,
Mhm,
seen the same terrain, different times of the year, some different vegetation, but enough similarities, right?
mhm.
That connects you to people who were there
Yeah,
dozens, hundreds of years, centuries
just you
ago.
saying that, the hairs on my arms go up because you felt it.
Hmm.
It felt like my ancestors were looking over my shoulder and that everyone who had ever walked this trail, the ghost was with me.
Yeah. So here we have Holy Dirt, the Camino Journey. We're talking with Molly Lord. The book's just in the carrots, add to cart. And not everyone can take these journeys, a Camino like this physically, but you can take it right now through Molly's writing and her vision. So there's something about connecting to antiquity, right? That gives us a perspective on our lives,
Yeah,
and it's very common now to talk about being in the moment. But when you start something like this isn't the plane ride where you're gonna end up and be glad that you could get off the plane. Um, so we talk about the journey and the destination, and we're hearing a lot of that here because this is not a microwave experience.
no, no. Um, I think what caught me by surprise is one of the many things is you know how in life we can throw out a the saying be in the moment
Right.
and we get it intellectually we
Yes.
yeah I
Right.
get it be in the moment but and then but we're not but we give it lip service right um when you do a walk like this and you're going 2 to 3 miles an hour. I mean, your whole life just came to a screeching halt. And when you accelerated, it wasn't very much. It's not like being at home on the freeway. It's not the rat race of your day to get to work. It's not, how do I get dinner on the table and blah, 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 our craziness. This is 2.5, maybe 3 miles an hour, where your whole nervous system um, meets a saying like that and you walk it and you live it being in the moment and it gets so entrenched in you of what it means to be in the moment where you go, oh, I finally get it to my bones what a what an adage really means. You know, we're always talking in life about, oh, you have to keep moving forward. Well, that's all well and good, but when you're taking a million steps over a 5-week period and your only choice is to keep going forward, you think, "Oh, I get it. I get what it means that we can't go back. We can't pray ourselves back." Um, a lot of people think, "Oh, I wanna go back home," or "I wanna." No, no. Back isn't where we're going. We're going
Hmm.
forward, and Santiago here was the lure, and I can't think of a day, Scott, in my life now where I've had some big things happen in my life in the last couple years where I'd love to go hide under the covers and go back or
You're not
and
alone. You're not alone.
yeah, and I have to and I do remember down to my bones, keep going forward, step at a time, step at a time. You don't have to totally complete this problem because if you take it so far, the universe is going to meet you and carry you the rest of the way.
Hmm.
And that's what happened on the Camino time after time. Um, and it's just a microcosm for what life is here. It took me a while to get that. I thought the Camino was magic all by itself. And I realized the magic is here. There's just so much chaos, it's harder to see it.
So, time is a funny thing because we're going to wind down here pretty shortly. And it
Mhm.
seems like we just got started.
I know.
And you went 500 miles in what, 5 weeks. And uh, those first days when you were in pain with a hamstring, riding in a van, longing to be on the trail, and yet uh, wisely deciding uh, to forego part of it to enjoy
Right.
the rest of it. Um, there's a, I was thinking there, so there's a pre-Socratic philosopher named Thales, and he came up with a lot of theories around geometry. And one of the things was that as we move closer to an object, if we're at a certain distance, its perspective is a certain size, and if we cut that distance in half, it will double its size in perspective. And so it will continue to double in size as we half the distance. But traveling at 2 miles an hour, or 3 miles an hour, it's going to close in, it's going to get bigger much faster the closer
Mhm.
we get to it, right?
What a great,
And
yeah, that's
at an
great.
increasing rate. And let's talk about you planned for 2 years, you knew it was going to be 500 miles, you know it was going to be 5 weeks. Let's talk about those last days,
Hmm.
and then we'll kind of let you sum it up.
Okay. Um, you don't, well, people might say they changed on the Camino. But what really happens is you transform. It's an it's alchemical. Um, it's not like a certain day I knew things would be different. Like I hit day 30 and I said, "Oh, here's the day it happened." It was slow and it embedded itself in my nervous system without my really knowing until I got home.
Wow.
When the last couple days, I really wanted to put on the brakes. I would, I'm an overachiever, and so I can, stop and go, did I get everything I was supposed to get from this? Did I hear all the messages? Did I? So I could, in those last couple days, usually when your mind is blank, oh, I could stir up all sorts of questioning myself. Did I do this right?
Hmm.
So, and a lot of people do that. But for the most part, there was this calm in me. The song, when I was training, I often had on my iPod um, Paul Simon's Diamonds on the Soles of Her Shoes, and it became the anthem for my walk, training for my walk. I had that on my iPod, and I didn't play it the whole time I was there, except for the last day going into Santiago. And I sobbed listening to it because it was no longer my anthem to train or my carrot to go. It was now a confirmation of you did it and
Mhm.
you didn't know the rules, so you made them up along with your body. Kudos. And I just felt like every pilgrim that had ever walked was patting me on the back saying, job well done, job well done. Diamonds on the soles of your shoes.
Mm.
And I danced into town. And
Wow.
yeah, arriving, I can't say I had a huge epiphany of what this was about. I left living in the question, which surprised me. I kind of
Mhm.
wanted all this wisdom, Scott. I wanted it downloaded and I would walk into Santiago with as a sage. Wrong. I ended with more questions than I started with. But
Well,
coming
I
home,
don't think that that's surprising, right?
no, but you know
Because
how you talked about expectations?
right.
Those were my expectations of,
Yeah.
wow, am I going to be a wise pilgrim at the end? No, I wasn't.
Well, there is there's more that we don't know than what we do know.
Yeah.
It was, I think it was Einstein had asked his class one day, of all of the information in the universe that's knowable, what percentage do you think we know right now? And they said 1%. And he said, I think that's very high. So,
Yeah.
and so all of our discoveries often lead to more questions. And so I'm not surprised that at this time, having traveled the 500 miles, having taken all the time, that you ended up with more opportunity to experience what's available.
Yeah. To bring the Camino home, I think is kind of the whole point of doing
Mhm.
the Camino. It doesn't end. It doesn't end in Santiago. It's cliche-ish, but it's where the journey begins.
Mm.
And I thought it was cliche-ish until I lived it and went, oh God. I wanted the credits to run on the
Well,
hero's journey.
I want people to buy the book, and Molly, we're gonna wind it up here, but
Okay.
I just say right here in the carousel, click add to cart. It's going to open a new tab. Send it to somebody you know that needs a journey, but get a couple of copies for yourself. As you read it, then you can hand it out. Holy Dirt, a Camino Journey, Molly Lord, #1 Amazon bestseller. Molly, I'm just going to wind up by saying that millions of people have taken this journey, but there are not millions of volumes of people's experiences on this. So I commend you and thank you that you wrote this down, that you put this in
Yeah.
a form that many of us can also enjoy.
Yeah. What a lot of people won't know till you get the book is for every song there's a QR code. And also I've had some people just type it into Amazon Music and just say, give me this song. I want to know what she was thinking at the moment.
Mm.
Um, so there's definitely a music component to the book.
All right. Well, we're going to sign off. Thank you for joining us, Molly, here on Amazon Live.
Thank you,
And
Scott.
tell everyone, click the book in the carousel.